What if, during a moment of deep prayer, Mary revealed secrets to you that could change your life forever? I'm not talking about something symbolic or distant, but about words and signs so clear they would make you stop and rethink everything you thought you knew about faith, hope, and the meaning of your own journey. Imagine being there, alone, in silence, perhaps with your heart heavy with some pain or uncertainty, and suddenly feeling that you're not speaking into a void, but that someone, on the other side, is truly listening and responding. Have you ever experienced this? In places like Medjugorje, thousands claim to have experienced something like this, and among all the reported messages and apparitions, there is one aspect that few talk about: the messages that have not been publicly revealed. The so-called hidden messages. They are not written in books nor proclaimed aloud. They are words and revelations that, according to some visionaries, Mary shares only in the deepest moments of prayer. It is in this intimate, almost secret space that signs, impressions, and directions emerge that, for those who receive them, have eternal weight. What intrigues me and, perhaps intrigues you, too, is that these hidden messages seem to be linked to an urgent call, not a sensationalist warning, but a personal and direct invitation that touches the soul deeply. It's as if Mary wasn't just talking about what will happen in the world, but mainly about what needs to happen within each of us before it's too late. What you're about to discover may surprise you. Deep prayer, the kind that transcends mechanically repeated words, is the gateway to this encounter. It is at this point that the noise of the world begins to fade away and the heart finds space to listen. Mary, according to testimonies, manifests herself gently, yet with a force that changes the course of those who listen. It could be a verse that suddenly emerges in the mind, a peace that takes hold of the heart amidst chaos, or even a dream laden with spiritual symbols. These are subtle, yet precise ways in which she leads to truth, and perhaps it's precisely this subtlety that causes many to ignore or even doubt these experiences. After all, we live in times that demand visible proof, spectacular signs, something that impresses the eyes. But what if the true revelation isn't in what's shown, but in what's felt and understood only by those who open themselves to hear? That's where the hidden message gains strength. It's not delivered at any time, but on occasions when the heart is ready, thirsty, and vulnerable. Medjugorje has become a symbol of this mystery. There, they say the unrevealed messages are part of a greater plan, which will unfold in due time. But what if, somehow, Mary is already sharing parts of this plan with ordinary people during simple moments of prayer? What if the next person to receive a sign is you? Stay with me until the end, because understanding how this happens can completely change the way you approach God and your own life. As we delve deeper into this topic, I want you to realize that we're not just talking about history or ancient tales. We're talking about something alive, something that could be happening right now, perhaps in the heart of someone watching this video right now. It could be that your own silence is about to become the stage for one of the greatest revelations of your life, and it is exactly at this point, between the visible and the invisible, between what is said and what remains secret, that we will now enter. Because when we talk about these moments of deep prayer, we're not just revisiting old stories, but touching on something that may be alive and pulsing within you right now. And that's why I want to open up a space here to listen to you too. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far. Or, if you've experienced something similar, it could be a sign, a dream, a feeling that's stuck in your heart. I read each message carefully, and often what you share ends up helping others who are going through the same journey. And since we're building this community of faith and reflection together, please leave a like. This isn't just a number on the screen. It's a simple gesture that helps spread this message to many more people who need to hear it. The more engagement this video gets, the more YouTube understands it should reach people who may be silent, searching for precisely that word. If you're not already subscribed, sign up now and turn on notifications. This way, every new piece of content I bring will reach you without you having to search. It's like continuing a conversation that already started here, but which still has a lot to delve into. Your participation here is what keeps this space alive, making this message reach hearts that may have been waiting for it for a long time. And speaking of delving deeper, let's continue, because what comes next will take us even deeper into this mystery that Mary shares only with those who place themselves fully before her in prayer. Medjugorje is a small village in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a place that, at first glance, might go unnoticed on a map. But since 1981, this seemingly ordinary spot has become a spiritual epicenter that attracts millions of people from around the world. It all began when 6 young people claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary appearing before them, bringing messages of peace, conversion, and warning. Since then, apparitions have continued to be reported, some daily, others on specific dates, creating an atmosphere of mystery and expectation that remains to this day. The most intriguing thing is that even with decades of reports, many details remain shrouded in secrecy. Among the hundreds of messages released, there are those that have never been publicly revealed, the so-called secrets of Medjugorje. These are prophecies and instructions that, according to the visionaries, will only be known in due time, when each one has a clear purpose on the spiritual plane. And this is precisely where the connection with what we discussed earlier begins. These revelations, in their most intimate form, are not delivered in grandiose speeches, but in the profound silence of prayer, in the direct dialogue between Mary and the human heart. Those who have visited Medjugorje often speak of a feeling that's difficult to explain. It's not just the pilgrimage atmosphere or the collective fervor. It's an almost palpable presence, as if the very air is charged with something greater, something that touches the spirit discreetly but intensely. Many describe profound changes after being there, as if they've undergone an internal transformation that reorganizes values, priorities, and even important life decisions. It's as if the messages received there weren't limited to words, but rather seeds planted deep within, slowly germinating until the right moment to blossom. And when we look back at history, we realize that this isn't the first time a seemingly ordinary place has become the setting for divine encounters. Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe, each of these places holds its own stories of apparitions and signs. But what sets Medjugorje apart is the continuity and depth of the dialogue that seems to exist between heaven and earth. It's not just an isolated moment in time, but an ongoing journey, where messages, signs, and experiences come together, creating a complex spiritual fabric, full of nuances and hidden truths. Some see this as living proof that God and Mary continue to act in history, not as distant figures, but as an active presence in the daily lives of those who open themselves to listen. Others, more skeptical, try to explain it away with psychology, coincidence, or collective influence. But even the most critical recognize something difficult to ignore: the transformative impact these experiences have on people. It's as if, regardless of their origin, the message carries a real power to provoke change, heal emotional wounds, and awaken a new sense of purpose. The curious thing is that, for many, the true power of Medjugorje lies not only in the visible apparitions, but in the invisible encounters that take place there. People who arrive without faith and return renewed, hardened hearts that open, old wounds that find solace. All this without any major outward signs, but through small moments, sometimes during a simple prayer, a song, or even an absolute silence, when you realize you are not alone. This silence is more than the absence of sound. It is a sacred space, where something greater can be revealed. It is in this inner place, independent of geography, that Mary seems to choose to deposit messages that don't need to be proclaimed to the four winds to be powerful. Perhaps because some truths are not meant to be heard by everyone at once, but to touch specific individuals at the exact moment they are ready to receive them. And when we think this way, we realize that Medjugorje is not just a point on the map, but a symbol of this intimate and mysterious communication. The physical location may be special, but the experience of encountering Mary, of receiving a personal message, can happen anywhere where there is true openness and surrender. What unites these two aspects, the place and the moment, is the willingness to place oneself before the sacred without haste, without masks, with one's heart exposed. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding how these hidden messages manifest requires us to talk about the subtle signs, those that often go unnoticed but carry profound meaning for those who know how to interpret them. And this is where we begin to enter the realm of personal experiences. The stories that don't make the headlines but that shape the lives of those who experience them. Before we continue, comment, "I'm on this journey too, so I know you're walking alongside me in this discovery." The hidden message is not a mysterious code that needs to be deciphered with clues scattered in symbols and riddles. It is much more subtle and, at the same time, more powerful. It is the kind of revelation that doesn't come packaged in audible words or spectacular signs, but rather manifests itself in the silent intimacy of a profound prayer. It is that feeling that cannot be explained, but is known. It is as if, in an instant, a thought, a memory, or a new understanding emerges so clearly that you realize it couldn't have come from your mind alone. Anyone who has experienced this knows it's not about imagining, but about receiving. This kind of message isn't usually proclaimed aloud or written down for all to see. On the contrary, it's often intended for just one person, at that specific moment in their life, and provides an answer to something that's been buried deep within their heart. It can be clear guidance for making an important decision, a light in the midst of emotional turmoil, or even a comfort that arrives when all strength seems to have been exhausted. That's why it's called hidden, not because it's secret in the sense of being purposefully hidden, but because it can only be perceived by those willing to delve deep enough to find it. The curious thing is that, when we look at the stories of apparitions and revelations throughout the centuries, we notice that this pattern repeats itself. Great changes in people's spiritual lives often came not from grandiose events, but from discreet and intimate encounters. A simple phrase at the right moment, a silent gesture, a look that seemed to pierce the soul. The power of these experiences lies precisely in the fact that they don't impose themselves, but rather offer themselves. And, by offering themselves in this way, they demand something that not everyone is willing to give: time, dedication, and vulnerability. In the case of Medjugorje, the visionary's account suggests that Mary speaks not only with her voice, but with her presence. There are times when, according to them, words are unnecessary. What is transmitted is something the heart understands without needing to translate. It's like receiving a revelation that you can't fully explain to others because it was tailored to you. And, even if you try, words can't convey the full weight of what was felt. This is one of the most striking characteristics of the hidden message. It's not meant to convince everyone, but to profoundly transform the one who receives it, and perhaps it's precisely this personal nature that makes these experiences so difficult to validate or discredit. There's no physical evidence to present, no records to analyze, but there's a visible impact on the lives of those who have experienced them. And this impact is impossible to disguise. People who previously lived, trapped in fear, hurt, or confusion, suddenly find clarity and courage to change. They change the way they treat others, how they organize their lives, how they face challenges. It's as if the message received were a key that unlocks internal doors that had been locked for years. This is a hidden truth that isn't often spoken. Deep prayer, when sincere and unmasked, is a place of revelation. Not in the sense that one will always receive a grand vision, but because it creates the space for something outside of our own consciousness to reach us. It's a moment when distractions diminish, barriers fall, and the mind and heart align to receive. And when that happens, life is never the same again. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding the hidden message also requires us to talk about the difference between hearing and listening, about how certain spiritual signs don't arrive as expected, and about the danger of ignoring small insights that can actually be great answers. It's at this point that we begin to realize that the journey of faith isn't just about expecting miracles, but about being attentive to what's already happening around us and within us, in ways so subtle they can go unnoticed. Comment that resonates with me, so I know you're feeling this connection as we continue together. Spiritual silence is not a void, much less a meaningless space. It is, in fact, a fertile field where the divine presence manifests itself most clearly. It's curious how, in the world we live in, silence can often be uncomfortable. Many people feel the constant need to fill any space with words, sounds, images, or information. But when we speak of deep prayer and the encounter with Mary, silence is exactly the opposite of what the rush of everyday life has taught us to fear. It is not absence, it is presence. A presence so real that, when experienced, it is impossible to confuse with simple stillness. In moments like these, it's as if the entire soul is on alert, not in the sense of tension, but of receptivity. The body relaxes, the mind slows, and suddenly, an inner space opens. It's in this space that something subtle yet intense begins to happen. Anyone who has experienced this knows that spiritual silence is not a place of inactivity, but a scene of invisible movement where unspoken words echo more powerfully than any speech. It's in this state that Mary seems to speak most intensely, not with long sentences, but with impressions, feelings, and certainties that well up in the heart. This type of communication is unlike anything we're used to. It's not like hearing an external voice, but rather like perceiving something being deposited within you. It's a feeling that blends peace and urgency, as if, at the same time as you're comforted, you're also receiving a mission. Often, this silent speaking of Mary brings answers you didn't even know you were seeking. You might be facing a difficult decision, and in the silence, a specific thought stands out as if it had been placed there, clearly and firmly. Other times, it might be a memory that arises to be healed, or a feeling that transforms effortlessly. The most impressive thing is that spiritual silence reveals hidden truths that the noise of routine often obscures. It removes distractions, external voices, and the noise of doubt and fear, leaving space for something pure and true to find its way through. And it is at this point that transformation begins. A person who learns to value this silence realizes that it is not limited to the moment of prayer. It begins to permeate their entire life, influencing choices, strengthening their mindset, and helping them maintain peace even amidst storms. There is also a profound aspect of intimacy in this process. Silence creates an encounter where there are no masks. It is impossible to pretend before God and Mary when we are in this state. It is there that we see ourselves as we truly are, with our flaws, our strengths, our fears, and our most sincere longings. And, paradoxically, it is precisely in this vulnerability that we feel most welcomed. Mary does not come to condemn us in this moment, but to guide us and remind us that, even with all our imperfections, there is a path prepared for us. Don't think about how many important conversations in your life have taken place away from the spotlight, in simple places, when no one was looking. Spiritual silence is exactly that, a behind-the-scenes encounter of the soul. It is there that the strategy for our journey is mapped out, fundamental decisions are inspired, and unexpected strengths are renewed. And that is why those who discover the power of this silence never again see it as emptiness, but as the secret room where revelations happen. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because truly understanding the importance of spiritual silence also requires paying attention to the signs. It leaves small indications that something is being worked on within us, even without our conscious awareness. These signs are like fragments of a conversation happening on another level, and if we learn to interpret them, they can lead us to a much broader understanding than we imagine. Right there, I'm on this journey too, so I know you're walking with me on this quest. When discussing Medjugorje, it's impossible not to encounter the mystery of the 7 unrevealed messages. They are the focus of many conversations, studies, and even debates within and outside the church, precisely because they carry a spiritual weight that no one can fully measure. According to the visionaries, each of these messages is specific, with a defined purpose, and will be revealed to the world only at the right time, according to Mary's plan. But what arouses even more curiosity is that these are not simple warnings or advice. Some say they contain crucial guidance for preparing humanity for future events. What we know so far is fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle that haven't yet fully fitted together. The seers assert that each message has a time and a defined that there's no point in trying to rush this process. This isn't just about dates or events marked on the calendar, but about spiritual moments when humanity will be ready, or must be ready, to hear what will be said. There's a profound meaning to this, because a message delivered before the right time can be misinterpreted or simply ignored. Some scholars point out that the content of these messages may range from warnings about spiritual and moral crises to more urgent calls for conversion and prayer. Others believe that prophecies may be linked to global events, social changes, and even natural disasters, always with the aim of awakening awareness rather than provoking fear. But beyond these theories, what truly draws attention is how Mary, according to the accounts, is preparing everything gradually, respecting the rhythm of each heart. There's also the idea that these messages connect like chapters in a single book, each revealing a part of the larger picture. It wouldn't make sense to read the final chapter without understanding the previous ones, and that's why the silence surrounding them is so important. It's a silence that protects, that matures the content until it can generate the necessary impact. And, in this time of waiting, our responsibility is to be attentive to the signs, because nothing prevents, in moments of deep prayer, fragments of these truths from already being whispered to hearts willing to listen. When we think about this, we realize that we are not faced with a mystery created to fuel curiosity, but rather a carefully constructed spiritual process. It's as if there were an alignment between heaven and earth, where every detail is calculated so that, at the moment of revelation, no one can say they weren't warned. This completely changes the way we view these messages, not as distant secrets, but as living guidance that may be discreetly shaping the course of our spiritual journey at this very moment. What's most intriguing is that, even without knowing the full content, many people report feeling the impact of these messages. It's as if the anticipation of them is, in itself, a kind of call to change. Those who take this seriously begin to review their attitudes, rethink decisions, and adjust their mindset toward something greater. It's as if preparing to listen is as important as the revelation itself. This internal change is perhaps the true beginning of the process, because it transforms the heart into fertile soil, ready to receive the seed at the right time. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding the essence of these 7 messages requires looking at how Mary has guided hearts over the years, as if discreetly preparing a people to receive a truth that can change everything. And it is in this preparation that we find valuable clues, not only about what is to come, but about what is already happening, even without many realizing it. Comment below. That makes sense to me, so I know you're feeling this calling along with me. Deep prayer is not just a moment of words addressed to God or Mary. It is, above all, a conscious opening of the soul, a state of surrender that transcends the surface of repetitions and formulas. It is in this kind of contemplative and sincere prayer that something shifts within us. The internal rhythm slows, emotional barriers begin to give way, and the mind enters a receptive silence, ready to capture what, amid the noise of life, would otherwise go unnoticed. It is as if, by crossing this inner door, we create a direct channel to understand, without noise or interference, what Mary wishes to convey. This communication doesn't often happen as we imagine. It's not always a grand vision, an audible voice, or a visible sign. It can manifest as a sudden thought that seems to have come from nowhere, as a memory that emerges charged with meaning, or even as a feeling of peace, so profound that it completely contradicts the external scenario. Those who experience this understand that deep prayer is not about talking more, but about knowing how to listen. And listening, in this context, is much more than hearing sounds. It is allowing a hidden truth, precise guidance, or unexpected comfort to find space to lodge in the heart. Over the years, many accounts from people who have had experiences in Medjugorje, and even from those who have never been there physically, indicate that Mary responds in a personalized way. It's as if she knew exactly what to say and how to say it, adapting the message to the language that soul understands. This personalization is only possible because, in deep prayer, we present ourselves without masks. It's a moment when there's no longer room for representation, justification, or disguise. The heart, naked before the divine, becomes fertile ground where any seed planted quickly germinates. There's an important detail that often goes unnoticed. Contemplative prayer isn't an escape from the real world, but a more conscious immersion. In it, by opening this channel, we're not just seeking comfort or answers, but also preparing to act. Mary, according to many testimonies, doesn't bring messages to keep us still, but to transform our mindset and decisions based on what has been revealed. It's at this point that we understand that this intimate moment of prayer is just the beginning of a much larger process, which continues when we return to our routine, carrying that inner light to illuminate the darkest corners of our daily lives. What strengthens this channel is consistency. Like any deep relationship, intimacy with Mary is built with time and presence. An occasional encounter can be memorable, but it is daily visits, even short ones, that shape our spiritual sensitivity and make us more able to recognize when she speaks. Over time, this perception becomes so natural that we begin to recognize her touch in seemingly ordinary situations, an unexpected encounter with someone, a word spoken at the right moment, an obstacle that turns into an opportunity. All of this begins in the silence of prayer, but overflows into all aspects of life. And perhaps the greatest beauty of this process lies in the fact that it's not necessary to be in a sacred place to experience it. Medjugorje, Lourdes, Fatima, all these places have their importance and power, but Mary's presence is not limited to geography. The channel that deep prayer opens can be activated anywhere in a bedroom, in an empty church, on a lonely walk, even in the middle of traffic, if there's genuine openness, because, in the end, the most important geography is that of the heart, and it is there that the message takes root. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding the role of deep prayer also leads us to recognize the subtle signs that appear afterward, when we're no longer on our knees but continue walking with a new perception. These signs, often small, are like threads connecting what we receive in silence to what we experience in the world, and interpreting them can completely change how we react to circumstances. Comment: that makes sense to me. So I know you're picking up on this connection as we move forward together. The signs Mary sends are rarely accompanied by visual spectacles or resounding sounds. More often than not, they hide in the details, almost as if disguised in everyday life, waiting for an attentive heart to recognize them. This is where many people get confused, because they expect something grand, and end up not realizing that the answers have already arrived, silent, delicate, but loaded with meaning. These signs can take the form of sudden feelings, such as a peace that makes no sense given the circumstances, unexpected courage to make a difficult decision, or a mental clarity that arrives so suddenly that it seems impossible to have come from reason alone. There are also those signs that come through internal inspiration, a thought that arises repeatedly, almost like a gentle reminder, an insistent urge to reach out to someone for help, or to revisit something long forgotten, or even an impulse to change a habit, even without fully understanding the reason at the time. Over time, looking back, we realize that these small intuitions were actually precise directions to avoid mistakes, protect against dangers, or open paths that would otherwise remain closed. But Mary also communicates through what many call meaningful coincidences, unexpected encounters, phrases someone says without knowing they're touching on a crucial point in their life, a text or song that appears at exactly the right time. These moments, which for some go unnoticed, for those who are spiritually attentive, function as clear confirmations that there is something greater guiding each step. It's as if, behind the scenes of our journey, a silent care is aligning circumstances to lead us in the right direction. Often, these signs are accompanied by a very specific sensation. The heart recognizes it before the mind. It's a thrill, an emotion that arises without explanation, a certainty that requires no external proof. This is the mark of divine communication. It doesn't impose itself. It doesn't force. But when it arrives, it fills in such a way that it leaves no doubt for the recipient. That's why paying attention to these subtleties is so important. It's like training a new sense, fine-tuning our perception until we can identify Mary's presence in seemingly banal gestures. The great challenge is that in the daily rush, these signals can be drowned out. When the mind is constantly busy, overloaded with information and worries, it's difficult to perceive the delicacy with which they manifest. This is why so many divine messages are lost. Not because they weren't sent, but because there wasn't space to receive them. Learning to slow down, even in small moments throughout the day, is essential to creating this openness. Sometimes, a simple pause, a minute of conscious breathing, or a closer look at your surroundings is enough to notice something that would otherwise have gone unnoticed. These signs also serve as reminders that we are not alone. Knowing that Mary can guide us, even in simple things, brings a profound sense of care and direction. It's as if every detail is part of an ongoing dialogue, where she not only speaks during great moments of prayer, but also closely accompanies us, guiding us in ways that fit perfectly into the natural flow of life. Recognizing this changes the way we approach each day, because we begin to realize that, amidst our routines and obligations, we are living a larger story, written with the collaboration of heaven. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding the subtle signs Mary sends also leads us to reflect on what we do after we perceive them, whether we ignore them, doubt them, or have the courage to follow what has been indicated to us. And this response, more than the sign itself, can define the course of our spiritual journey. Right there, I'm on this journey too, so I know you're paying attention to these details along with me. When we examine the subtle signs Mary sends and compare them with Scripture, we realize a common thread that spans centuries, connecting personal experiences with great biblical prophecies. It's no exaggeration to say that many of the signs reported today fit together like living pieces of a narrative that began long before us. Since ancient times, God has always chosen simple means to convey profound messages, almost always using symbols, seemingly casual encounters, and discrete words that carried eternal meanings. The prophets of the Old Testament, for example, often received revelations that were not accompanied by great external manifestations, but rather emerged in dreams, visions, or a small voice that could only be heard in silence. Elijah, on Mount Horeb, did not encounter God in the strong wind, the earthquake, or the fire, but in the gentle whisper that came afterward. This detail clearly mirrors the way Mary manifests herself today, not seeking to impress through spectacle, but through the depth of her message. The logic is the same. Those expecting something grand may be frustrated and fail to realize that the extraordinary is happening in seemingly simple ways. The New Testament is also replete with passages that illuminate this understanding. The Annunciation itself is an undeniable example. Mary, still young, receives a message from the angel Gabriel that would change the course of history. But this encounter was not public, not surrounded by crowds. It was intimate, private, a dialogue between heaven and earth, witnessed only by the two. This model is repeated in the accounts of Medjugorje and in so many other places where she is said to have appeared. A personal call, made to a few, with an impact destined for many. That there is also a connection with the prophecies of Revelation, especially in the figure of the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars, Revelation 12. For many scholars and believers, this image is a direct reflection of Mary and her mission in the end times. A mission that includes not only warning but also spiritually preparing those willing to listen. The subtle signs she sends today can be seen as echoes of these biblical visions, gradually fulfilling what was foretold thousands of years ago. It's interesting to note that in the Bible, divine messages are rarely delivered completely and directly. From the outset, they often come fragmented, like prophecies that only fully reveal themselves when the time is right. Jesus himself spoke in parables, using images and stories that required attention, reflection, and an open heart to be understood. This reinforces the idea that Mary's hidden messages, like the signs she sends, follow the same pattern. They are invitations to delve deeper, to seek, to not be content with the surface. Another point of connection is the biblical insistence on spiritual vigilance. Jesus repeated several times, "Watch and pray." This vigilance is not just about waiting for future events, but about being sensitive to what God is already doing now. When we connect this to the theme of Medjugorje and the unrevealed messages, we realize that this ongoing preparation is fundamental. It is not enough to wait for the moment when the prophecies are fulfilled. We must shape our mindset and heart, so that, when they do happen, we are not caught off guard. The very pattern of biblical prophecy shows that God has always sent signs before taking definitive action. In Exodus, signs preceded deliverance. In the Gospels, miracles and parables preceded Christ's passion and resurrection. In Revelation, trumpets and seals announce events that unfold sequentially. This same principle may be at work now, through Mary's discrete signs and the messages that still await their time to be revealed. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding this connection between today's signs and biblical prophecies is not just a matter of knowledge, but of discernment, and discernment requires sensitivity to recognize when a revelation is before us. Even if it comes dressed in simplicity, it is this sensitivity that can determine who will be ready when the fulfillment is complete. Comment: that makes sense to me, so I know you're following this line of reasoning with me. There are stories that, when told, carry such intense weight that it doesn't matter whether you heard them from a simple villager or someone well known. The essence is the same, and the impact they leave is profound. These testimonies are more than moving tales. They are living proof that something happens when the soul truly makes itself available in the silence of prayer. I remember a middle-aged woman who said she arrived in Medjugorje without great expectations. She didn't consider herself religious, but she was going through a time when life seemed directionless. During a prayer before the apparition hill, she described feeling a presence so intense that tears began to fall. Without her understanding why, she didn't hear any audible words, but in her heart, a simple and powerful phrase echoed, "I never left you." It was enough for her to return home with renewed strength to start over, changing her mindset and her daily decisions. Another striking case was that of a young man who had lost his father and felt completely lost about his future. During a moment of silent prayer, alone in his room, he reported feeling as if someone had placed a hand on his shoulder. There was no one physically there, but along with that touch came a certainty he describes as impossible to produce by one's own mind. "Trust, you will be guided." He says that, from that moment on, he began to notice small coincidences, encounters, opportunities, and even obstacles that, when overcome, opened doors to paths he never would have planned alone. There are also testimonies of people who received very concrete inspirations. One woman reported that, after weeks of praying the rosary for a family problem, she felt a strong urge to forgive someone who had deeply hurt her. The moment she decided to obey this call, a series of reconciliations began to occur in the family, restoring relationships that seemed lost forever. She didn't have a vision or hear a voice, but she realized that the inner change she experienced was the answer to her prayer, something she says she could never have achieved alone. These accounts are not isolated. Over the years, hundreds of people have described similar experiences, whether in Medjugorje, other Marian sites, or even in their own homes. Some speak of vivid dreams that bring answers, of sudden mental images that are later confirmed in real life, or of an inexplicable peace that arrives at the exact moment it is most needed. And in all these cases, the common element is the feeling of an intimate and personal communication, uniquely directed to each person. It's fascinating to note that, despite differences in culture, age, or religious background, many describe similar patterns: a call to forgiveness, reconciliation, trust in God, and life change. It's as if the essence of the messages is always the same, but adapted to the reality and needs of those who receive them. This reinforces the idea that this isn't something generic or distant, but personalized care, designed to touch exactly where each person needs it most. And perhaps most impressive is the transformation these silent encounters provoke. It's not just a fleeting emotion, but a lasting change in the way of living, priorities, and how we face challenges. It's as if, after this contact, the person carries with them a new internal compass, capable of pointing the right path even on the most confusing days. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because observing these testimonies helps us identify common elements that can serve as signs that Mary is truly communicating, and recognizing these patterns can prepare us to better understand when this happens to us. Comment, "That resonates with me." So I know you're feeling this connection as we continue together. When we talk about Mary's unrevealed messages, it's easy to fall into the trap of viewing them as merely an intriguing mystery, something to be deciphered to satisfy our curiosity. But the truth is that they carry a much deeper and more urgent purpose. It's not just about knowing what will happen, but about being spiritually prepared to face whatever comes, whether in the outside world or within ourselves. This is why spiritual preparation cannot be seen as optional, but rather as a genuine necessity for these times. Many believe this urgency is linked to major future events, and it may be, but before any external event, there's a silent battle taking place within each person. It's there that the most important decisions are made. It's there that faith is strengthened or weakened. Mary's messages, revealed or not, are like a constant call for us not to put off until tomorrow the transformation that can begin today. Because, deep down, the big question isn't what will happen, but how will I be when it happens? This preparation isn't just about rituals or prayers repeated mechanically, but about concrete changes in mindset and attitude toward life. It's about learning to live with purpose, to make decisions based not on fear but on trust. It's about cleansing the heart of resentment, healing old wounds, adjusting priorities, and making room for God to act freely. Often, this preparation requires sacrifices that aren't easily letting go of habits, cutting out certain excesses, learning to be silent when the urge is to scream. But each of these steps is like sharpening a blade that must be ready at the right moment. What makes this preparation even more serious is that, according to the accounts of apparitions throughout history, Mary's warnings never come to entertain, but to warn. She doesn't waste words. Each message is given because there is a real need for change. And ignoring this call can mean arriving unprepared when the time comes to act. That's why the time we have now is precious. It's not time to wait for spectacular signs and only then believe, but to use each day as a brick in building a solid faith. Another important point is that this urgency should not be met with panic, but with responsibility. Panic paralyzes, responsibility mobilizes. When we know there is something to be done and that we are being guided to do it, fear gives way to conscious action. Mary doesn't want hearts to be terrified, but prepared. And being prepared means living in such a way that, regardless of what comes, nothing can take away our inner peace or the certainty that we are on the right path. This is the essence of spiritual preparation, becoming so firm within that the storms outside cannot bring us down. It's not about denying that there will be challenges, but about strengthening ourselves so that, when they arrive, we can face them with serenity and courage. This doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of constancy, discipline, and the willingness to let ourselves be molded every day. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding this urgency also leads us to reflect on the tools. We have to prepare ourselves from spiritual practices to internal changes that require confronting truths we often avoid. This is where theory ceases to be sufficient, and practice becomes urgent. Comment: I'm on this journey too, so I know you're making this commitment to preparation with me. Listening to and interpreting a message from Mary isn't something you do with your ears or your logical mind alone. It's an exercise in presence, sensitivity, and openness that involves your entire being. The first key is to create space for this communication to happen. We live in a world so saturated with stimuli that silence seems strange, but it's precisely in silence that spiritual perception sharpens. You don't need to be in a sanctuary to do this. Just find moments, even brief ones, where you can disconnect from the excess information and turn inward, where her voice often resonates. The second key is to cultivate close attention to internal movements. A message won't always come in the form of clear words. It could be a sense of urgency to act in a certain way, discomfort in the face of something that seemed normal, or a deep peace in the face of a difficult decision. These emotional and spiritual states, when accompanied by a sense of clarity, can be indicators that something is being communicated. It's important not to dismiss them out of hand, but to observe them, pray about them, and ask for confirmation. Another practical tip is to pay attention to repetitive signs. Mary, like God throughout biblical history, often confirms messages through repetition. It could be a passage of scripture that appears repeatedly in different contexts, a phrase heard from different people at close moments, or even images and symbols that recur in dreams and thoughts. When something insists on presenting itself to your consciousness, it's worth asking if there isn't a hidden direction there. Furthermore, discernment is essential. Not every inspiration or emotion comes from a divine source, which is why constant prayer and alignment with the Word are so important. One way to discern is to evaluate whether what was received leads to positive transformation, brings us closer to truth, promotes peace, and awakens love. Messages that generate paralyzing fear, pride, or division rarely come from Mary, who always leads to reconciliation and hope. Keeping a spiritual journal can also help. Recording insights, dreams, signs, and feelings that arise during or after prayer allows us to identify patterns over time. Often, only in retrospect do we realize the logic behind something that seemed isolated at the time. This habit creates a spiritual memory that strengthens confidence in the process and helps us understand the hidden truth that gradually reveals itself. Finally, one must be willing to obey. Receiving a message is only the first step. Interpreting it correctly and putting it into practice is what truly transforms one's life. Often, Mary's guidance calls for simple yet challenging actions: forgiving, asking for forgiveness, changing a routine, giving up something that hinders spiritual growth. The courage to act on what one receives is what opens the way for future messages to be even clearer. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding how to listen and interpret is only part of the process. The next step is knowing how to sustain this connection in our daily lives so that it's not a one-off event, but an ongoing dialogue with Maria, who accompanies each phase of our journey. Comment: that makes sense to me. So I know you're absorbing these directions as we go. Throughout this journey we've traveled together thus far, you may have already realized that we're not just talking about ancient stories or distant tales, but about something alive, real, that could be happening right now, deep within your heart. Mary's messages, whether clear or subtle, always carry a purpose: to transform, strengthen, awaken. And if at any moment, while listening to these words, you felt something different to memory, a thought that made sense, a sudden peace, or even a discomfort that made you reflect, it may be that, in some way, this communication is already happening to you. This is the most fascinating aspect of this experience, realizing that it's not just about listening, but about participating. The message isn't content to be consumed like reading the news or watching a movie. It's an invitation, and like any invitation, it demands a response. Maybe your response today is simply to make more space for silence, or to decide to pay attention to the details of your daily life, or perhaps even to resume a prayer practice that's been neglected. The important thing is not to let this flame that began to ignite here be extinguished by the hustle and bustle of everyday life. My intention with this conversation is not just to share information, but to create a space where we can journey together, exchanging insights, testimonies, and lessons learned. Because, as happens in Medjugorje and so many other places touched by Mary's presence, it is in the encounter of stories that faith is strengthened. When you share what you've experienced, even if it seems small, someone on the other side may receive exactly the confirmation they were asking God for. This is how grace multiplies, from heart to heart. So, if this message touched your heart in any way, if you've ever felt or feel, now that Mary spoke to you in the silence of prayer, I'd love to hear about it. Right, this makes sense to me, or share your experience in the comments. I'll read it carefully, and you can be sure others will also be edified by your sharing. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. If you've made it this far, with me, it's a sign that this topic truly resonated with you in some way, and that's exactly why I want us to continue this journey together. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future content. That way, whenever we bring you something new, you'll be here, receiving and reflecting along with me. Please also, leave a like, as it really helps keep this space alive and allows this message to reach more people who may need to hear exactly what you heard today. And to let me know you were with me until the end, write in the comments, "I'm with you until the end." It will be special to see who stayed here, sharing this profound moment. And before you leave, there's a video right here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into some of the points we discussed today. Click through and follow me there.